Good afternoon, everybody. We are happy to be having some Friday afternoon discussions with all of you remotely here, and decided for safety purposes and because we have some groups doing some other things that this was probably the best way for us to be able to share with you. So the CTE department, I know you guys are working on a task for Marcy. You have been working with her in the last few weeks, and now you're going to be working independently. Math department, I know you guys are meeting in Brooks' room, 302, and Marcy will be working with you both this week and next week. So if you are one of those two groups, we would ask you to go ahead and complete that checkout form that we launched last week. The link is here on this slide that you're looking at now. And just choose the other district assigned PD, and that will be good. It'll be a quick, easy little thing, but we do need you to go ahead and complete that. And then obviously you're watching this presentation if you just heard that, so we're in good shape there. So the rest of us will be working on our PLC work. One of the things that we decided was really important is to be able to have clear expectations for everyone for what our Friday work is going to be. After our launch of our exit tickets last week, that you guys just started that new form, there were some questions, and it just made us realize that we needed to make sure the expectations for our Fridays was very clear. So that's what Angie and I are trying to accomplish today. So we hope by the time you're done here, those will be clear to you. So we'll start with our start time. Kids are dismissed at 12:42 this year. That's new for us. And we want you to have a 30-minute uninterrupted lunch on Fridays. Since you don't get that during the week, you definitely deserve it on Fridays. So that means that your lunch would be 12:45 to 1:15. But we do need to begin promptly at 1:15 to make sure that we have plenty of time for our just-in-time learning as well as your PLC in your individual groups. Wrap up your lunch and be ready to roll by 1:15, and we'll be good to go. Staff meetings. We are going to be starting once a month to have staff meetings. Those will take the place of your just-in-time learning on those days. So we always are going to plan for just-in-time learning to be no more than 30 minutes. However, on those days, just depending on what Mr. Hutchinson has for topics, those could run over and into some of our PLC time. We'll try to keep them, as short as we can, but do know that since we are only doing them once a month, those could run over the 30 minutes and into some of your PLC time on those weeks. For each month, whenever we're having it, Mr. Hutchinson will let us know whether he wants to do it via Zoom or if we'll be meeting in the auditorium where we can social distance. If you're in one of the groups that doesn't always meet in our building, please mark your calendar for these dates, because we will want you to be with us for the first 30 minutes to an hour, whatever amount of time that staff meeting takes. We will want you in our building for those staff meetings because we cover things that it's important everybody hears. So I do want you to make sure you mark your calendars with those dates. A couple of them aren't actually the first Friday because we are on some sort of vacation on the first Friday of the month, but the first one that we are in session. So the remaining Fridays of each month, if the first one is going to be a staff meeting, then our just-in-time learning will be from 1:15 to 1:45, so 30 minutes. We're going to be very cognizant of keeping it to that. And then 1:45 to 3:30 is your dedicated PLC work time. You'll be working on the teaching assessing cycle and a variety of things like that. What we're going to talk about today is what the appropriate work may be for that. It is important that we are moving forward and getting into that PLC time each week. So the just-in-time learning, which is that first 30 minutes, our topics are flexible. This year we have been given building control, meaning that, whatever needs we have are what we will be addressing in that time. So as we are gathering data, looking at your forms and what you're doing in your PLCs, we will adjust as we need. Right now, we've just kind of brainstormed as an admin team with Angie to begin to get some topics to get started with here, and then we'll adjust as we go. So some of the things that we're thinking about and we'll be covering in the next few weeks is MTSS strategies that you may be using on Fridays. What would we like to see happening on Fridays? That's going to be part of our topic. Differentiation strategies to benefit our EL students. We did notice when we were putting together our spreadsheet for parent-teacher conferences that we do have a number of students who are ELL students who are struggling. And so how can we better in our classrooms support those students and meet their needs? Because clearly we need to work on that and be aware of that. And then support for your work in your PLC. We need to make sure we're looking at student data and adjusting instruction according to what the data is telling us. Those are things that we want to make sure that we are doing. And how can we support you in that data? Like the blind scoring was one thing we've done. That's an example of trying to support you with your PLC work and looking at student data. So topics like that, those are the types of things that we want to do with that just-in-time learning. But again, keeping it to 30 minutes so that you will have from 1:45 to 3:30 to get into your PLC time. Your PLC work time each week is non-negotiable, meaning you need to be weekly talking in your PLC and looking at data and adjusting instruction. Is there never going to be a time when that's not true? Of course not. We just had a time. You know, parent-teacher conferences had to suddenly be changed, and you needed time, and we needed you to have that time to prepare for that, so we had to change our Friday. I'm not saying that will never happen, but as a rule, you need to realize that you're expected to have student data to look at and student work to look at and discuss weekly. That's just our expectation. Your PLC work time, you should not need to wait to hear from Angie each week as far as what you're going to do during your PLC time. You will hear from Angie each week what the just-in-time learning is going to look like and what the topic's going to be, and is it virtual, is it going to be a video like this, how's that going to be delivered. That you'll be hearing from Angie each week. But what your PLC is going to do from 1:45 to 3:30, that is your PLC's decision. You guys are the ones who know what your needs are. However, we do expect, and you're going to hear me say this over and over, you need to be looking at student data each week. So there shouldn't be the question asked, well, do we need to have data next week? There should be student data of some type every week that you are discussing. It may only take up a 20, 30-minute piece of your time, and then the rest of your time is used for something else. But we need to get in the habit of every week we have student data of some sort to look at. We hope it's a common formative frequently, but it won't always be that. There may be other things that you're looking at, but we would want you to have data of some sort. So now Angie's going to take over, and she's going to help you look at how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together.
Thank you, Shelley. When we talk about this PLC work session time that you're given every Friday, we want you to have the flexibility, some choice, and some voice in what tasks you are focusing on and what you get accomplished each week. The purple circle here represents a lot of the learning that we have gone through our TQ days and a lot of the training that has been job embedded that we have been working on. By the time we get to this blue dot here, we really expect for you in your PLC time to be putting some of those strategies into action and to reflect on those. Have they been effective? Do we need to pull in more strategies? How can we support one another? And until we really enact some of those strategies and use this PLC time effectively, we're not going to see the student achievement go up, which is represented by our green dot here. And so it really is a balance. Just a little bit of history for those of you that may be new to the building. We have provided job embedded training from several resources. We've had guest speakers come to the district, one of which was Eric Jensen. And he really worked a lot with us about engaging the brain and really thinking about how stress impacts how we function on the daily. And especially with the shutdown last semester, we have a lot of additional layers of stress that may be impacting not only our families and our students, but even our teachers in our PLCs. I just wanted to bring that back to the foreground and say that we do have resources that we can fall back on if we have some situations in our classroom or in our PLC where we think that we need to pull back in some trauma-informed strategies, or we need to consider how poverty or stress may be impacting some of our learners. We have also engaged in learning around a lot of our grading philosophies, and we spent a lot of time selecting our guaranteed standards and essential skills, those big rocks that we were willing to intervene on and develop common assessments around. This entire process that we worked on was around Tom Schimmer's work, and we spent a lot of time working on standards-based learning and really asking ourselves, what does proficiency look like? This is where our no zero policy came from. It also wraps around this idea of giving students the ability to recover if they struggle. So any of our work around pacing guides or alignment would actually fit into this. We spent a lot of time around Cassandra Erkin's work, and this really is the teaching and assessing cycle. She really drove home the fact that we need to spend a lot of time around question 1 and 2. What do we want students to know and be able to do, and how will we know if they learned it? So this is where you're pulling in that student data and you're looking weekly at, did we achieve our goal? And if not, how are we going to adjust our instruction? Which leads us into how do we provide those interventions and extensions? And that work came from Mike Mattos. In fact, our BLT is doing a book study right now on the RTI at Work pyramid to help us build our tool set for interventions and extensions for Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction. This is where questions 3 and 4 come in. What do we do if the students did not learn it? And how do we support the students that have already learned it, that need a push? So when we think about your flexible PLC work session time, we absolutely are saying that part of that needs to be around student data. That work around the 4 questions. How did the students perform? And what is the data telling us? The next thing is how are we going to adjust our instruction? I do want to mention that because of COVID, there's also something that you may not have been working on with your unit cover sheets in the past, which would be pre-assessments that could be used for preventions that are going to be addressing some of those gaps that other grade levels may have indicated to you in our documentation from last semester about major skills that were not covered. And so some of your PLC time may be looking back in those documents for what foundational skills the students may be lacking that you can pre-teach on Fridays leading into a new unit. So as Shelley mentioned, this may not take your entire PLC time, but if our just-in-time learning was from 1:15 to 1:45, perhaps you spend 1:45 to 2:15 working on student data, which will leave you from 2:15 to 3:30 to take care of other department or PLC business that may come up. But part of that time is about that housekeeping, that taking care of your PLC and its business. It's part of this too. If you see that there are members of your PLC that are struggling with new content, it's perfectly acceptable to support one another during part of your PLC work session, to be sharing the successes that you're having, to be modeling and sharing what worked in your classroom, and to spend some time preparing for a hybrid or virtual scenario. I know that there are people in every PLC that are whiz bangs at Schoology, while there may be other people on the team that are really struggling with that. We've been trying to be out in front 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks ahead with planning so that we can be prepared if we have to go virtual again. Taking care of your teacher team and making sure that you're pacing and all of those conversations around your curriculum, that should be part of your time as well. If you guys decide you need to align units to standards, or perhaps you have a new curriculum or a new book that you need to align units to, perfectly acceptable. We do need to be asking ourselves, what does the student data say and how are we adjusting our instruction? And that doesn't mean louder and slower, guys. It means how are we going to do things differently if students aren't getting it? I mentioned kind of a pre-assessment or a needs assessment. You guys may be designing new common assessments that you never had in the past because we didn't have shutdowns to deal with and gaps this large before. All of these things that you could be planning together are perfectly acceptable. Again, we want you to focus on where are we now, where are we going, and how do we close that gap. But your work as a team, it really is our scorecard for how we are moving towards our building goals and our district goals. You are our boots on our ground. And the work you're doing in your PLC work session really is the difference between us getting a physical and us getting an autopsy. Are we intervening in time for the students to actually recover, or are we making phone calls because a student has multiple Fs all year long? So I just want for you guys to take some time today to come up with a balance that works for your team so that you can manage your PLC business as well as respond to student data.
Okay, so just to wrap us up here and get you guys headed into your PLC time, just want to remind you that every week we do need you to fill out the new checkout form. That means this is replacing that agenda that you used to do. What we were hearing was that that was not very valuable to anyone. You guys weren't finding it that valuable. We as administrators it was bulky and awkward for us as well. So Angie and I kind of worked together and she created this new form, and I think it's going to be quick and easy for all of you. It's also going to be so much more valuable for us as administrators as we support you, because we can quickly see all the responses from each of our PLCs for 1 week, or I can look at one specific PLC and what they've done each week for several weeks. So it's going to be, I just think, much more beneficial for everyone involved. What I do want to be clear on is we want one submission from each PLC. So you should be talking as a group about this and maybe filling it out at the very end of your PLC time each week. But we don't want multiple people within the same PLC filling it out. We just want it filled out one time by one person. So you can decide who's going to do the typing. You should all have input on it and get that submitted. So the link is here for you. Again, it is quick and easy, but it is very helpful. If you are doing something other than normal PLC work, such as the math department this week, we still need this filled out. You just click on that other assigned district PD option and go from there. So I think that we hopefully have given you better guidance on what our Fridays are going to look like. And you've seen the connections in our work and how this is going to flow the rest of this year. Communicate with us. Let us know if you have questions. Let us know if you have things that you think we need to cover on Fridays, because that's really what this is all about. We use formative assessment from you guys, just like we expect you to use formative assessment with your students. So let us know what your needs and wants and desires and all that stuff are in regards to the just-in-time learning, so that we can support you in the best way that we can. Have a great weekend.